Welcome to the Cattywampus podcast. I'm your host, Kurt Driscoll. I've got a great friend, Nathan Castleberry, with me today. Man, thanks for being here.
Yeah, man.
So I keep getting these pastors coming up around here, and so everybody's afraid I won't say shit or something like that around you. So, but
right in.
So we're going to just get right on it. But no, but man, the thing I really, really appreciate about you is we've been around each other now probably close to 10 years or so. Authentic, always on point, and maybe I should or shouldn't say. I actually heard you cuss in a sermon that you were delivering. It wasn't Vision Wars, so if you want to hear him cuss when he preaches, come to Vision Wars. But
I feel a little more free.
Yeah, but it was in context, and it wasn't just there. But it was like you're always willing to go to where someone is that's in need. And you meet them there, man, and you're always a joy to be around.
Thank you.
And so thank you for being here, but thank you for just leading well,
man, in
our community. So,
wow.
Well, so if you could just kind of, how can someone find you or get a hold of you? I know, I want you to talk about it's local church, Canton.
Yeah.
But just kind of tell us 30,000 foot view there real quick.
Yeah.
Kind of who you are,
sure,
where you are.
I'd be happy to. So I grew up in Pensacola, which is the Gulf Coast of Florida. And it's not, when people think about Florida, they think Sunshine State, but that's a whole different kind of southerner down there. You got surf racks and gun racks on the same car. And so that was an interesting thing. I grew up with kids with board shorts and mossy oak camouflage, and that was kind of like the standard wardrobe of the Gulf Coast. But found my wife in college down there. We've been married for 13 years. We've lived in Pensacola, South Florida, Las Vegas, and here in Georgia for almost a decade now. Got 2 kids, an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and they're a whole lot of fun. They've got some crazy genes, like they're 97th, 100th percentile in all their sizes, which I'm like standard issue, like nothing remarkable about any of my size, but they're just big kids, and it's fun to see them do their thing. Planted a church called Local Church Canton, kind of an offshoot from a family of churches based in Forsyth County called Local Church. And I was part of that leadership team for the last, 8 years or so. And I was just a miscellaneous kind of pastor. I would teach, do youth, led the creative team, music sometimes. I was just kind of a dude that didn't know how to say no.
Right.
And so when
hence the reason why you said yes to the show. You're still working on it. So.
Yeah, I still don't know.
Yeah.
But when 2020 happened, and all the random ministries I was leading for the church went on pause when the pandemic happened, I kind of had this moment with God where he's like, you're getting a C in 7 things. It's time to get an A in 1. Essentially, I felt God was telling me, you're 35. It's time to figure out what you're going to be when you grow up.
Yeah.
And we kind of felt like Canton was a community that was calling our name. Really good friends with the developers at the mill down there, this community center. They wanted a faith presence in there. So it's kind of cool to have a church plant where there's a brewery and restaurants and boutiques, and it's just life is happening there. They let us host all these events. So our little church is about 2 years old and loving life.
That's awesome, man. Well, thanks for being here. I know I'm not sure what Cattywampus events you're going to share today. We talked briefly about it, but I have one I want to, you're the only person that I know of. I mean, and there's one watching or someone knows that we'd love to hear them because I want them to sit in the chair and tell the story as well. It's on your left hand. If you hold it up. So right there. Okay. There's one finger.
Yeah.
Or 2 that are short.
Just one.
One finger that is the middle finger.
Yep.
Is a little shorter.
It is.
And if I recall correctly, it was a push mower.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how, and I'm sorry to pick on you with it, but it's a Cattywampus moment. It sounds maybe like some of your vacations you were telling us beforehand, but how do you cut your finger off with a push mower?
Well, the irony is that it was actually on a vacation.
Come on.
Yeah. So for whatever reason, ever since the first vacation that I went on with my wife, 13 years when we first got married, there's been something that's gone wrong. Like, had kidney stones on our first vacation. I've been stung by a scorpion on vacation. We were in Disney World and our whole family got the stomach flu and got quarantined to our room with an ER visit on vacation. So lots of things have gone wrong. This particular was when the world started opening back up in 2020. We went down to my parents' house in Pensacola, and he's got a much bigger yard than I do. Mine's about the size of a rug, and his is an actual yard. So me and my son always liked to ride his lawnmower around when we would, go visit. So for this particular story, we dropped my kids off so Erica and I could have a little getaway over in like the St. George area. So I'm like, Dad, don't cut the grass. Me and my son are going to do it when I get back. So Erica and I go to the beach, have a nice little getaway, and nothing was really open yet still, but we had a nice time on the beach, came back, cut the grass with the riding lawnmower, and then get the push mower out to get in all the little nooks and crannies.
That was a mistake.
Yeah, well, when you let go of the handlebar on a push mower, it's supposed to kill the engine. Well, it kept going, and I decided to bend over and try to pull the little governor cable, and I was squatting down, pulling it with my right hand, and I guess I was bouncing with my left hand, and somehow I just felt something nick me. I jumped away and was like, that was, but it was mangled, man. It was gnarly. The bone was exposed. So yeah, they couldn't save it. Like before we rode to the ER, I'm like, wait, let me go look for my finger. And I was still in shock. And right when I ran back down the driveway, the shock wore off. And I'm like, I guess I can live without it. Yeah. So my dad was like, yeah, I heard it get kind of mulched up by the lawnmower. So I knew you weren't going to find it.
Yeah.
So no finger on that.
No finger. Well, I don't mean to pick on you with it, but I really was that. I'm sure you're not the only person that's happened to.
Yeah, sure.
So if they're watching, man, we want you to come tell your lawnmower Cattywampus.
I'll start a support group.
We'll figure out the name. We'll get you a T-shirt. I know a guy over here that can brand it for.
Oh yeah, but high four. Dude, my friends are they
give it.
Yeah, they let me have it.
Yeah. Well, but thanks for sharing that. Thanks for letting me pick on you just a little bit with it, but and the thing is, and that really just it sets the tone of how you always bring yourself to it. The way you lead your church, the way you lead your family, the way you're a friend, and just in any way, it's just you're open, you're honest, and it's just like, yeah, dude, I cut my finger off with a lot more.
Yeah, what you see is what you get.
Yeah, it's there. A little less of it now, but it's still it's what you see. So, how would you describe on your life, you pick one Cattywampus event or season of life that you just saw radical dysfunction or disruption, awkwardness, what would it be?
Yeah. Well, I can say this, in my line of work, we get to walk with people in their highs and their lows. We get to celebrate births and marriages. We also do a lot of funerals, a lot of crisis care for marriages. And if I'm thinking kind of ministerially, some of the tools that I've had to use in some Cattywampus situations, a lot of relational dysfunction rose to the surface in 2020. When everyone's kind of stuck with themselves, with their families, when there wasn't a vacation that they could use to distract themselves from some of the underlying issues. It wasn't just one thing, it was several things. Just a lot of marriages didn't seem to make it through the pandemic. And so there was a lot of counseling, still a lot of things ongoing. But yeah, man, I'd say 2020 was Cattywampus in a lot of ways around the world. But yeah, I just had to really dive in deep with a few families that were really hurting, and not just hurting because they couldn't go to work, not just hurting because there was a global disease, hurting because their issues were now front and center.
And you couldn't escape them. What's interesting for me is, counseling and therapy is kind of like, if you have a car, you have to change the oil. You have to put gas in it. You got to rotate the tires. You got to change the tires. You got to replace the brakes. If you don't do those things, it becomes you become reckless, dangerous. Yeah. Or it's going to blow up, right?
Yeah.
And so it was this week that my wife and I went to a counseling session, therapy session. It's more of a coaching session than it's anything. If you want a healthy marriage, she more coached us through. And it was all in around communication. We talk well, we engage well, all those things, but do I shut down and not share some things? And does she shut down and not share? And she had this bowl that she made us hold and to be the receiver. So it's like, so my wife in this case was the person that's gonna give information, and I'm having to receive the information. I'm holding this bowl and it had 3 little hats in it. And you had to take the 3 things you had to come up with that are keeping you from receiving what someone's going to say.
Wow. Okay.
And it was, so whether it be pride or ego or, anger, whatever it was, like, okay. And so then I had to sit there and I had to physically hold this dang bowl. It was empty. So Sandy, if you're watching this, I'm still pissed off about this. So I had to hold this bowl. But what she was saying is so you got to hold the space open for the person.
That's good.
So the person, you're not going to say anything or do anything, just let them talk and then have a pleasant way of cutting them off or stopping them and say, okay, what I hear you saying is this. Not like, hey, I'm going to fix it, say what I'm going to do. It's just what I hear you saying is this. Yeah. Is that correct?
That's good.
Right? That's painful, dude.
It is painful.
It's painful.
But it's also powerful.
It's extremely powerful. What I experienced and saw and we have, I don't think anything is excellent. You aspire to be excellent, right? But I don't sleep on the couch, right? We don't holler and scream with her. We have a good marriage. I want an excellent marriage. Problem is, most of it's me, right? I got stuff I need to work on. But what I saw in that exercise, right? She sat us in chairs across from one another. And what I saw in that exercise was freedom or expression for a wife to where she was able to share something. She didn't know what she was going to, but you created the space.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times with what you're saying is that as life gets busy, we're able to fill that space with work, shopping, trips, cars, coffee shop, wherever it is that disguise it. When that's all pulled away, what did you see? What did you see when individuals were confronted with, they're sitting there holding a bowl. Yeah. They don't even know, hey, what's in the bowl to keep it. They're just trying to figure out, like, dude, why is everybody so mad at it? Like, why is this tension this way?
Yeah. I want to come back to the bowl thing because I think that's fantastic. So when there's no distractions, when there's, and here's the thing, all the things you just described, work, leisure, social things, when all that's taken away, you start realizing how many of your needs have been going unmet. And I don't care if it's addiction. I don't care if it's mental health issues. I don't care if it's bullying, acting out. I think any unhealthy behavior can be traced back to some unmet need. And I think the reason that
emotional needs,
relational needs, like 1 John chapter 4, I love this. It says God's love is brought to full expression in us. And so that means I think if we don't have healthy relationships with one another, the people that God has put in our life, I think it's limiting the amount of love that we can even experience from God himself, because look at God, Garden of Eden, spent the first 6 days, heavens and earth, stars and sky, birds and fish. I mean, all these things, it's good, creates humans. And the very first thing that he says is not good is Adam's aloneness, which is crazy to think about because Adam was in paradise naked with God, had a really cool job naming the animals. But God said, this isn't good. What the first thing that God said is not good was not Adam and Eve's sin. It was Adam's aloneness. So that means that that's not a commentary on God being able, like God was totally sufficient to meet his needs, but God had a bigger design, and that's companionship. So when companionship gets cattywampus, we start looking for other ways to meet those needs.
What do you think the biggest divide you saw in relationship? Like what was the biggest divide? I guess divide or the biggest vacancy or gap. Yeah.
It's like there's no silver bullet, but if we're talking about, probably seen this in leadership books before, but like the misalignment leadership theory, it all starts back from 1 to 2 degrees of unmet needs, 1 to 2 degrees of relational misalignment that just goes unaddressed because it doesn't feel like a crisis now. And just like you said a minute ago, preventative maintenance, we tend to see counselors when we're in crisis mode. And when we're right here, it's crazy. That's a big gap to close. Yeah. So most of what I've seen is not to be super reductionistic or diminishing the significance of affairs and all these other things, but if they would have just got back to the basics of like Christ-likeness, not having to get the last word in, believing the best instead of assuming the worst, just doing those basic things. If they could get the blocking and tackling right, it would create an ecosystem where some of those bigger issues could be addressed. But the thing I've seen is people are more fighting about how they're fighting than what the actual issues are. They're never going to be able to address the issues because they're too big. They're too focused on trying to dismantle the way they talk to each other and the way they make each other feel. And it's just this big hurricane, chaos of misinterpretations and taking things personally and not giving each other the benefit of the doubt. So if we could get back to, let's address things before they get out of hand. Let's address problems before they become urgent. Because I don't care what station of life you're in, what season of life you're in, nothing gets better on its own. Nothing.
No, that's true.
It takes intentionality.
Yeah, without a doubt. If someone is sitting there trying to figure out how to hold that bowl.
Yeah.
Right? Like what have you learned, or what steps would you give somebody to create the space, right?
Yeah.
To come to a point where you're able to talk about and deal with that 1%.
Yeah, man. So I'm going to shout out to my friends at the Center for Relational Care in Woodstock. They do amazing counseling there, but they also do some great marriage intensives at a WinShape in Rome. We were fortunate enough to go through one as an enrichment exercise. And just that idea of like enrichment in general, I would just say, like, don't wait until your marriage, don't wait until your leadership and your team is falling apart. Don't wait until, we don't do this with our car. When the dashboard light comes on, you go to the shop, So like doing things as an enrichment, as preventative maintenance is a way to kind of head things off at the pass before they become, a crisis. So that's a first thing I would say is, go get help before you need help. That's step number one. But one of the things I just want to, steal or plagiarize from my counselor at Center for Relational Care is the marriage staff meeting where you...
So we just said, so you're a pastor, but you have a counselor.
Oh, 100%. Okay. Oh yeah.
Okay. So
he's got me crying like a baby every time.
So that was Pastor Craig at Dwelling Place.
Oh, I love him.
Dude, he's great. He was on 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. And man, it was awesome what he was sharing, but y'all both have that in common where you're openly expressing, man, this isn't something I'm telling you need to do. This is something that I do. Yeah. And I would suggest maybe you look into it because it's been very beneficial for me.
It's been incredibly beneficial for me. I think looking under the hood is a really good thing. I like to a couple times a year check in and just say, here's what I'm carrying in life right now. How am I doing? How am I handling it? I remember, so can I be super real?
Yeah, so, that's the point of this show.
Yeah. So, sometimes when I notice things in myself that don't really line up with who I'd like to be or my values from scripture, that's a good dashboard warning that maybe there's some unhealthy motivators. And just to be totally transparent, last fall, we found out my dad had a very, very small amount of prostate cancer. Now, my mom has had a whole career as a cancer radiation therapist, so there was immediately a great team around, and it was taken care of. Doctors were awesome, and it's totally gone now. It was never actually a crisis, but I didn't have a reaction that I was proud of. My first reaction was not sorrow for my dad. My first reaction wasn't, well, hey, we need to pray for healing. My first reaction was, well, dang it, am I going to get prostate cancer in my 60s? I immediately looked inward. Not exactly the most Christ-like, response. So again, that's when I came to my counselor. I was like, why? Like, what is that? And he was like, don't hate on yourself. You're not screwed up. There's not some deep, dark character flaw lurking. He goes, it's okay to be suspicious of things that you notice. So that's been a kind of a good word for me to use in my kind of walk with the Lord, trying to discern the voice of the Holy Spirit. Conviction is a good thing. There's a difference between conviction and condemnation. So I think when I started thinking about that, I was kind of self-condemning, and my counselor got me thinking more along the lines of like, be suspicious. The Bible says our heart is deceitful, so it's okay to be suspicious of it. Yeah. But again, doesn't mean we have to like start, self-flagellate,
So what did you learn personally through that discovery of suspicious,
Yeah.
of self-discovery. What did you learn?
Well, we are never going to totally be the people we would like to be. You know, when in the Old Testament, when God was given opportunity to introduce himself, he gave his divine name, which is Yahweh. And when he said that to Moses in the bush, you know, he's in the burning bush trying to call Moses out of exile and shepherding into being a leader for his nation and getting him out of slavery. And Moses is like, well, how do I, like, what's your name? How are people going to know? God could have used any attribute. He could have used his creativity, we love to talk about how loving he is. He could have used any one of his character attributes. Well, what he did is he used the word Yahweh, which means I am who I am. His consistency. And so I think if we're going to be Christ-like, yeah, it's good to be loving. Yeah, it's good to be upright and moral. Yeah, it's good to pursue wisdom and all these things. But we're never more like Christ than when we are trying to narrow the gap between who we are and who we'd like to be. So that was just a big thing for me. It's like understanding we're always going to have some sin-influenced impulses. We're always going to have some selfish impulses. That doesn't make you...
So many pastors have that?
Yeah, right?
You know? So I thought, it's the whole, if you're a Christian, you're perfect, right? Like, it's like, come on, guys. No, we realize we're not perfect. That's why we need Christ.
Yeah.
Right?
It's this weird thing where spiritually, if you are a Christ follower, we believe that we've been made perfect, but it's also we are being made perfect.
Yeah.
It's this already but not yet existence that we live in. And so just leaning into that, like the work that Jesus has done to make me whole is already done, but it's also being played out on this side of eternity as I try to become more like him. Again, it just gets back to narrowing the gap.
Yeah.
Narrowing the gap in our relationships with our unmet needs, but also narrowing the gap of who I'd like to be and who I really am.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, man. So what are some of your daily disciplines, those double D's?
Daily discipline.
Yeah. So it's like, if you're sitting there and you're looking at it to keep that gap narrow.
Yeah.
What are a couple things that you do daily or you would suggest for folks to do that have worked?
Yeah, man. Well, I think there's not a one size fits all. So I'm not going to try to tell people it's like a chapter a day keeps the devil away with Bible study, but Bible study is definitely huge for me. The reason I got this tattoo of the praying.
Oh, so I know we're another pastor with another tattoo. All right. So you have praying hands.
Yep. So I haven't got any bad emails about these from my church.
Not yet. It's the one on your right hip that they're worried about.
Oh Lord, if I ever get a tramp stamp, man, that means I missed a counseling appointment.
Yeah.
So my son's name is Declan, and it means man of prayer because I've never felt like I was a man of prayer. Yeah. I've always been interested in ministry and theology, but my attention span's just never been great for prayer. So the biggest game changer in the spiritual side has been journaling my prayers.
Man, it's huge.
Like that's how I talk to God because it's the only thing, sadly, that can keep my attention. So that's been a big thing for me, is just trying to get into that journal. And whether it's reflecting on things that I read or asking him for things that I feel like we need or thanking him. I do a lot of just recognition of answered prayers. That's been huge. My neighborhood has got a little gym I love to go to several times a week, and it kind of just keeps me grounded. I like to do circuit training. I don't like cardio. Again, I don't have the attention span for it. I need something every couple minutes. So I'm not much of a runner or a treadmill kind of guy. So just a couple of times a week, full body exercise, that's a big deal. And then to circle back to creating space, one of the things that we do in our marriage that I stole from, like I said, our counselor is the marriage staff meeting, where we basically do what you said. There's no, we have permission to say what we need to say, but we also do not choose to be defensive. There's no offering justification. It's purely working through, hey, where are we at financially? Where are we at with our calendar? Now let's start talking about where we're at relationally. And we just start bringing up, when this happened, it made me feel this way. So what we kind of committed to is, if it's my turn to share some things that are maybe a little cattywampus, I'm not going to do it accusatory. I'm not going to make her responsible for my emotions. I'm going to say this action maybe made me feel this way, but we communicate in a way that we're not assuming blame, because I want to assume the best about her. Just like I'd want her to assume the best about me. I would never intentionally do anything to make her feel that way, and I know she would do the same for me. So we bring up things, and then the only thing that we're allowed to say is an empathetic response. And a lot of times I think we're scared of that word empathy because we feel like we are somehow giving up our right to be offended or our right to be hurt or our right to be heard. And the thing I just have learned all that is empathy is not equivalent with endorsement. By me just empathizing and recognizing her feelings doesn't mean I'm agreeing with it or even saying that, I messed up. Right. But it's just validating like her reality. Yeah, it's real to her. So I need to take that seriously whether I agree with it or not.
It's creating a space for that, man. I realized this week that process was difficult.
Yeah.
Not because I don't want to have a conversation, but it's having to pull those things out and speak them out loud.
Yeah.
I'm removing this from the bucket. I'm removing this from the bowl, removing this, and I'm removing this. Created a space for you to share whatever it is so that I can understand what you're saying. And in theory, it says, it's quick, just take things. No, it's like I challenge you if you're watching this, get a bowl from the kitchen, put 3 items in it. It could be any 3 items.
Yeah.
Sit down with your partner, your spouse, your friend, your coworker, whatever, and sit here and say, okay, hey, we're gonna have a conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna take the 3 things that block me from really hearing you out. Over it's like she's like, yeah, y'all coming back next week? I'm like, yeah, no, I think I'm gonna be out of town, right? But it's the thing is, you're going to be held accountable to that, right? Like I got to do that today. I have not done that today.
But don't you want, even if it's stuff you don't want to hear, wouldn't you rather her feel safe to say that to you than some random other person?
All day long, every day.
Empathy is like, I don't want the people closest to me to feel like they've got to look elsewhere for those relational needs to be met.
Right.
That God has put those people in my life for us to be that provision. So that's something that listening, takes, that it requires a lot.
It really does. And it's, it's not our lack of desire for one another to do that. Like we all choose that, but life gets busy, when there's not a pandemic or we want to get into all anyways, when life is going on, there's so much distraction.
Yeah.
My distraction, I filled, poorly back in the day, but I still feel it poorly today, just differently.
Yeah.
It's just whether or not I'm willing to admit it, talk about it with accountability partners, and then have conversations with my wife and my kids. I got to create space for my kids.
Right.
Like my wife, kids, then everybody else.
Yeah.
Then I maybe return a phone call to Zach over there that's running the cameras, right?
Yeah.
But
even you as a leader, not just as a family man, but like the people that you have influence over, there's that certain degree of like wanting to be a place for them to know that you're not a person who's going to use their honesty against them. Like psychological safety is one of like the number one contributors to like workplace loyalty. We're in the
psychological safety.
Yeah. Yeah. Psychological safety is the idea of like, I can contribute to the ideation. I can contribute to the strategy, even if it's the contribution of maybe a critique. I can contribute these things in my workplace, knowing that I'm safe, that people are going to have my back. That's for, at least for my generation, the least loyal generation in the workforce ever, millennials. That's one of the things that keeps them there more than pay, more than benefits, is feeling like they're heard, they're respected, and they're valued, which that only comes from empathy.
You got to and it's you're intentional to create that space or that opportunity for them to feel that way.
Yeah. I had a mentor that told me, not all feelings are factual, but all feelings are real. And
that's truth. That'll preach.
Well, that's empathy. That's saying, I may not agree, but I recognize that it's real for you, and I'm willing to walk with you through that, and we'll see where it leads us.
Yeah. So speaking of that, is I land the plane here. If you look really just at this camera right here, someone that's out there and just feels hopeless. Their marriage is unraveling, their relationships are unraveling, whatever it might be going on with them. What would you want to tell them?
Yeah. So if you're going through something tough, like something that's falling apart, whether that's relational, professional, financial, obviously as a pastor, I'm really biased. Like I think the first stop we need to make is hitting our knees and crying out to God for help. The Bible tells us in Hebrews that because of the work of Jesus, we can boldly approach God's throne with confidence to find help in our time of need. So I want that to be true for you. I want that to be true for my kids. I want my kids, when they're hurting, to boldly approach me and ask for help. So that's the first thing I would say. But then the second thing I would say is, like, we're not created to handle any of our problems alone. Galatians 6 talks about this idea of each one being responsible for our own load, but being responsible for each other's burdens. So there's a difference between a load and a burden. Like, you've got tasks that you are meant to carry that no one is meant to carry for you. So just be very sober-minded about how we differentiate between the tasks that God has entrusted to us and the burdens that come with everyday life. Your kids are not a burden. Your marriage is not a burden. That is something that God has entrusted into you. And sometimes that may be in crisis mode, but just remember there's a difference between those two things. The burdens of life, crises, when things are unraveling, that's when we are called to receive the help of other people coming and helping shoulder those weights. So I just say, don't try to be a hero. Don't try to do it alone. Sometimes the most bold and brave and courageous thing you could do is recognize your own human limitations. The Bible talks about humility as something we clothe ourselves with. That means we choose humility. It's a lot better to choose humility than to be humiliated. So part of that is receiving help, asking for help, putting your hand up and saying, I don't know if I can do this. That might be the starting point for a breakthrough.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Well, thanks for being here.
Of course.
Thanks for your friendship, your support, your prayers, everything, man. And it's I'm grateful for you.
Appreciate
and I'm also grateful that you closed down his landscaping company. So you can't call Nathan to come cut your yard, right?
Just cutting mine.
So you just cut his yard, and we're down to an electric mower with the guards, and and his wife's got him in a helmet and gloves and pads. But on a serious note, if you want to know more, connect more with Nathan, it's local church Canton.
Yep.
Find him on Instagram. Find him on Facebook.
Yeah, man.
And also, he didn't talk about it today, but I'm gonna give him some props. If you like the green egg, and if you like the smoked stuff and talk about barbecue and all that, it's man, he's always posting pics.
Yeah, that's
talking
centered
and talking about what he's cooking on the green egg, man. So
of course,
but I appreciate you. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for your willingness to be open and vulnerable.
Dude, I appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
I've learned so much from you and your crew over the years. I think our relationship started with just me kind of helping with media, and I just can't really help but to, sometimes I'm wearing the producer hat, other times I'm wearing the pastor hat. And I will tell you, outside of my own church on Sunday mornings, Vision Warriors is my favorite place to preach, because the people that you are serving are not taking the grace they've received lightly. And there's a hunger for life. There's a hunger for substance and spiritual things. And I love it. I love what you guys are doing. It's inspired me. And if you guys aren't aware of what's going on with Vision Warriors and all the ministry that Kirk is doing, get involved. It will mark you. Being in a room with people in recovery is a powerful thing. So thanks for the invites. Thanks for allowing us to partner with you guys over the years.
Super grateful.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. Thank you for watching today. Check back next week for another great episode of Cattywampus, and be safe in the yard with mowers.
Peace out.
Yeah.